In this video, I'm joined by a voice of calm and reason in the Hex and PulseChain communities who I've been listening to very carefully for the past 2 years. And today he will be dropping the alpha on all things crypto security, how to protect your assets and all that good stuff. So with no further ado, let me welcome Mr. Jexxa.
Hey, how you going, Matt?
Good, man. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm not sure I've ever been referred to as the cool, calm, collected voice in the community, but I'll take that.
I've been following you, man, since I got into Hex and PulseChain, and I came across the Aussie Late Show, and yeah, you're always the calm voice of reason, and especially as you know with crypto, you have many different characters in crypto, right, and in Hex in itself. So it's good to have a whole multitude of people. But yeah, it's great to have you on because you've been in Hex since the beginning. You take your security very seriously, and I think today it'd be good to get into, or maybe start with the basics, because as we know, PulseChain, we're literally on the brink of PulseChain. It's going to bring in more people into crypto. There's a lot of people that probably haven't got their house in check so far. So maybe we could start at the beginning. Like what's the basics? What's the 101? What's the stuff that you see most people, newbies or even crypto veterans alike, making the kind of mistakes?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to cover as much as we can. And yeah, I think, like you say, with PulseChain launching, that's probably a chance for people to get their house in order, but also if they've done something that maybe they're not entirely happy with on the ETH side, now's a chance to maybe fix a few of those things. Obviously, being in Hex, sometimes we have a few things we can't easily change because of the nature of the hard locking. But yeah, this is a chance to get your house in order and tidy up a few of those things and make those adjustments now, for sure.
Because we do hear some horror stories sometimes of people, I don't know, they seed phrases are found, or their hot wallets are left open on their phone and they're on public Wi-Fi. There's so much. It can be a bit overwhelming, as you know, when you first get into crypto, because even just buying crypto from a centralized exchange, when you open up Binance or Coinbase, it looks like the inside of a spaceship, right? So never mind getting into DeFi and protecting your own assets. So maybe let's take it back to basics, and yeah, let's start with what do you see that most people are doing wrong?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way. Like especially when I first got involved, the ecosystem was pretty simple. Uniswap wasn't a thing. DeFi wasn't even really a thing. So we've evolved a lot over the last 2 or 3 years. And a lot of people, when they come into the space, the easy path in is send your money to a crypto exchange, leave your money on the crypto exchange. The harder path is obviously understanding a little bit more about the tech and how you should self-custody it, and then that leads on to a whole snowball of, okay, well, once you head down this rabbit hole, you've really got to start thinking about a lot of things to be able to keep your privacy safe and your funds secure. Maybe the other way around, your privacy secure and your funds safe. But yeah, so it's changed a lot, but the core principles are still the same. Just look after your seed words. That's what it boils down to. If you can just, if out of anything else we cover today, the one takeaway is just protect your seed words with your life, then you're halfway there. You're more than halfway there. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff we can do, and we'll dig into that today, because we start off with the journey of learning how to do this for ourselves, but we're going to potentially have these assets for hopefully decades, and to the point where they're actually valuable enough to be a legacy for future generations as well. So we've got to start planning for that as well now. So that's where I've been spending a lot of my time more recently, is in how do you do that legacy and estate planning stuff. But yeah, we'll cover the basics first before we delve into that.
That's going to be next level. Yeah, how do you pass it down to the next generation? So there's a system in place if something happens to you or your loved ones. Because I've got friends who are like, oh, do you mind if I give my wife your contact details, because she doesn't know what to do with any of the crypto if anything happens or what's not. Yep. So that is very important.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that and putting in place measures to help with that. And everyone's different. Everyone's got to come up with their with their way. But I've tried to, and hopefully we'll cover this if we've got time, I've tried to actually really put what I call a blueprint. So put a blueprint together of how you should look at the estate planning side of things. So that's probably a little bit more advanced than we probably should start off at today. So we'll go back a few pegs and have a look at a few other things first, and then hopefully we can finish off touching about the estate planning side of things.
For sure. I think for me, the first thing starts with the mindset shift, because when I got into crypto, like every other moon boy, I was just like, let me throw a couple of grand in, make my mills and get out. And you're not thinking about seed phrases or hardware wallets or writing down passwords and what's not. And I think flipping to that first and like, okay, let's take this seriously, because this isn't a 2-month affair or maybe 12 months, especially with PulseChain, liquid loans, POWERCITY, all these things that are going to be around for a long time, like you said, decades, and you'll be getting yield and what's not. So let's definitely start with the basics and start with shifting that mindset.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, did you want to jump in? I'll have a little bit of a chat about an intro and where I like to start people off, and then we can sort of branch off from there and have a chat about a few concepts.
Absolutely.
All right. Just give me 1 second. I'll bring up a screen we can have a look at.
Sure.
Okay. See if you can bring that one up for me, mate.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I'd like to discuss is cost of ownership, and this is all part of the security spectrum, which we'll cover in the next slide. So security is always a balancing point between convenience and how high a level security you want. Now, there's no point having the most secure setup you can, but it's just so inconvenient to use that you don't actually end up using it correctly. And this is what we see sometimes, where you used to see this a lot in organizations when I was working in those and setting up all the IT infrastructure. If you make it too difficult for users to actually use, they'll find ways to work around all your security I can't even speak now. The security you implement. If every time they have to jump through so many hoops that it's just stopping them actually doing their job, they'll either stop using your system and revert to other things, or they'll find ways around it. So that goes for us as individual users as well. If we make it so that every time we want to do a transaction, we've got to run down to a secure vault and get out our seed words and our passphrases and then drive back home so we can access our funds, well then, yeah, it's great. It might be nice and secure and no one's going to be able to break into your house and steal them, but is it really convenient? So we've got to find that balancing point. And then there's the other side, which is we can make it too easy. And yeah, it's great. It's nice and easy to use, but you've literally got zero security. So we've got to find that balancing point. And that balancing point is different for every single one of us, because it needs to take into account your technical skill, the amount of funds you're trying to secure, and what funds you're trying to secure. So what is it you're actually dealing with? Are you doing it for an individual? Are you doing it for a company? Are you doing it for, if you're one of the project owners? So if you've built a project for PulseChain, I can tell you now, they probably secure their funds in an entirely different way to an individual does, because then you've got multi-sig and things like that. So it really depends the entity you're trying to secure it for and what you're trying to secure. But we're always about trying to find that balancing point. So I'll jump in. We'll have a look at another slide here. So this is that security spectrum I was talking about. And we'll spend a bit of time running through this, because this one's probably one of the most important ones. So obviously I've used the Bitcoin symbol. I need to find a better symbol to put in here, but that was the one I went with at the time many years ago. These videos are quite old. If you've gone and looked at my hexsafe.win site from 3 years ago, where I ran through some security for their Hex community, you'll see something similar to this. It's changed a little bit in the design, but I did cover this in a bit of detail there. And essentially what we're looking at is security as a spectrum. So if you've only got a small amount of funds down here, that's freaking out on my screen. Is that?
Yeah, a little bit. I can see multiple mouses.
Yeah. I don't know what that's done there. It's a bit bizarre. I'll get that off. Okay. So if you've got a small amount of funds, then obviously you would look after it differently as if you've got a large amount of funds. But then we've got different things we need to protect against as well. So we've got, if we're starting out with a small amount, you may not go to these lengths, but I think you should set up your security in such a way that you're banking on it turning into a large amount. So have it set up the right way the first time, and then you can always add better things to that. It should be an evolving process where you do something once and you iterate on that and make it better and stronger, but still keeping that balance of security and convenience. So the first thing that we need to protect against, and I've got the little smiley face with the halo on it, because that's you. That's your own dumb self. And 99% of the time, when we hear about people losing funds, it's because the user's done something stupid. 99% of the time. Now, we are seeing some pretty clever attacks happen. I actually helped a guy the other day, and it took me a little bit to understand what had actually happened. So we're really good at checking. Like, we get used to, when we've been in this space, when we want to send some funds or something like that, we check the first maybe 5 or 6 characters of an address and the last 5 or 6 characters of an address and go, yep, cool, that's the one I need to send it to. But man, they're getting really clever now. And I've seen an address injected into someone's wallet where it looked nearly exactly the same as the address that they had just sent funds to. So they'd sent some stable coin to one of their own wallets on a particular address, and a duplicate transaction came in for a fake stable coin going to a wallet that looked nearly identical except for a couple of characters. And the guy was really good about it. He started to freak out and he went, okay, what's all this about? And he didn't do anything. He actually called me and said, okay, what am I seeing here? To this day, I still don't know how they managed to get that injected into his wallet to appear.
Yeah, they watch an ether scan or something and then just sending it to someone who's... Okay.
Well, that's it. So we were viewing it on Etherscan, and the transaction had shown up on Etherscan as though it had come from his wallet, but it clearly hasn't. It was, yeah. Wow. So you've got to be really careful. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. We've got to protect against our dumb selves. We've got to be super vigilant when we're using this tech. So checking all your addresses and contract addresses when you're interacting with them, be just spot on. And the biggest thing, like I said at the beginning of this session, it's your seed words. That is the thing that people give up all the time. And I suspect if this guy had interacted with that fake stablecoin, I'm assuming it probably would have led him down the path of maybe some sort of phishing type expedition where they tried to get his keys, or maybe an approval on a contract or something like that. From what I could see, that seemed to be the only logic behind the way they'd done this.
Well, so if he tried to move the stablecoin somewhere else, something else would have popped up, like you need to approve this or something.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of why they would have taken that approach, is they obviously needed the user to interact with it somehow. So whether they needed to approve something on the contract, or I don't know. I didn't spend... Once you see something like that, for me, it's like, okay, just you don't touch that. You never touch that coin. Don't try and interact with it. Even out of curiosity's sake, you just don't want to do it, because that's when you'll screw up.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So while we're on the curiosity thing, because that is where we see most attacks in the real world, so outside of crypto even, is the phishing type attacks where they pique someone's curiosity, and whether it's an interesting attachment they send them, or they send them a link to something of interest to them. So it's about piquing their curiosity, because humans are a bit like that. We get a little bit inquisitive, and then we want to click on things just for the hell of it, for shits and giggles, and that's usually when you come unstuck. Yeah. So if you see something like that, you just don't interact with it. That's the simplest approach. So looking around on Etherscan, that's harmless, but doing anything in your wallet with it, that's a massive no-no. So yeah, that was a really novel one that I'd seen, and just something that we probably need to be aware of moving forward now is those sorts of things. But really protecting against your dumb self.
Yeah.
So the next character along on our spectrum that's a little bit more nefarious. So that's an outside actor trying to get into our environment, our secure environment, whether that's sending a phishing email, trying to brute force attack passwords, trying to guess passphrases, seed words, installing viruses on computers. So that's an external online threat that we need to mitigate against. And so we've got our own individual self, then we've got external actors that we're presuming are malicious, and we've got to do something about. So that's really that online sort of stuff we need to take into account. We go to the next step, and that's probably more like theft. So probably more in the real world, to be honest. So how do you secure physical attributes, seed words, things like that you would keep in the physical world? So each time we go along this spectrum, there's a new set of threats we have to assess and put in certain things to deal with. So we keep going up. The next one is you've probably heard of the $5 wrench attack.
Mm.
So we can secure stuff physically, and if someone comes and belts with a $5 wrench until you give up that information, well, how do we protect against that? And that's that plausible deniability stuff. So there's ways you can do that as well. So you can give up, if push comes to shove and someone's beating you with a steel pipe, you can give up enough information to hopefully stop them beating you with a steel pipe, but still have funds secured somewhere. That's that plausible deniability sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So each time we build on this spectrum. The next one's obviously physical destruction. So fire, flood, things like that. How do we protect against those sorts of attributes? And this is where we start to get into the realms of, okay, how far do you go with this? So I think if you cover those first 5 attributes, you're in a pretty good position. Okay, that sets you up to deal with most things. And then you start going, okay, well, what if a meteor hits my house or knocks out a city or whatever? And you're going to crazy lengths there. Well, okay, how do I then secure against that sort of stuff? And then how do you get to an alien invasion? How would you? And I'm being absurd for a reason, because if you try and protect against everything, you build up so many layers in your security model that it's just inconvenient. Up until more recently, I thought that the chances of an alien attack were probably pretty remote, but hey, it's getting pretty weird out there.
Yeah, I mean, the American government are admitting, right? There's UFOs everywhere, so you never know. We've got some aliens coming for our 24 word C phrase. Maybe.
That's it. Yeah, so never say never, but let's deal with the things that we can control for now.
Yeah.
And put in some cool things to protect.
Let's deal with the threats on this planet first, and then we'll get into the
that's right.
Stuff in the solar system.
And look, maybe those Starlink satellites will have a better use one day, where we can upload our seed words up there or something. Who knows?
Nice.
I noticed there's a few questions coming in chat. I don't know if we want.
Yeah, Benny G asks, is that a zero-sum attack? Is that when they say
zero-sum? I'm not sure. I've never heard of zero-sum. I've heard of zero-day attack. Zero-sum, not sure about that one, Benny. Maybe I'm out of the loop on that one, but yeah, could be.
Tyrannosaurus Hex.
Dusting. So dusting, that's usually someone sends out a coin or an asset to a wallet, and that's not so targeted. That's a real broad-based push. Like you're literally like crop dusting. You're just sending out a heap of transactions to a bunch of wallets, and you're trying to. It can be done for a number of reasons. It can be done because you can use it to then do some sort of tracking. So you can follow where the dust goes or what people do with the wallets that contain that dust. So it can be like a doxing type thing, or can be more malicious, where they're sending you a token where they want you to try and interact with a contract or give approvals or do something like that. We see a lot of that. And I say sometimes airdrops get called dusting attacks. And I know this happened to Hex in the beginning when we done a wallet. An airdrop was done on I think it was the Monarch wallet, where 100 Hex was sent out to a bunch of wallets. It wasn't malicious. It was just testing this new tech that was cheap to be able to blast out transactions on the blockchain, and it was a way to give everyone a little taste of Hex and try and get them to interact with it. So that got accused of being a dusting attack. So some things are legitimate when they do that. Airdrops used to be done in that fashion. Now what we find is airdrops are more done in a claim basis, which I think is probably a lot better way to do it, because then you're actually, that if someone's gone somewhere and done a claim, they've chosen to interact with your project. So I think that's probably a much better approach these days, is that claim process. Once again, that brings apart another issue though, because when you want to do these claims, usually you've got to attach to some sort of DApp. You've got to give maybe an approval on a transaction, and then that brings about a whole another realm of security issues now, because, okay, can you trust that contract? What is it you're actually signing? So, it always comes back to our smiley face with the halo. You've just got to be super diligent when you're dealing with this sort of stuff. Probably one of the... You go. Yep.
Sorry. I've just got an alarm going off here. Sorry. So that's what I was going to say. Going back to, sorry to interrupt, but just a lot of this comes back to that first step on the scale, which is yourself. You've got to protect against yourself. And that's not getting caught up in the FOMO, the airdrop, or seeing someone's just given me 1,000 new doggy coin in my wallet. Let me see what I can do with this. Maybe I can trade it. And then you grant permissions and suddenly, whoosh, everything's out your wallet in seconds. So it really is coming back. Of course, all these things do need to be brought into attention. Like, for example, I think before, people in New York getting robbed because they had Bitcoin stickers on their cars and stuff, right? Like, but again, that still comes back to you, right? Even though it's the wrench attack or whatever, it's still you. You know, don't go to the bar and talk about how much crypto you've got or whatever as well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I still don't get this. So Ledger was getting dragged over the coals the other day because they posted a picture on Twitter with someone with their Ledger Nano on a chain around their neck, sort of showing off their new cool Ledger Nano, which is obviously a stupid thing to do. But whenever you buy these hardware wallets, they always like to include their marketing merch. So they give you like little bumper stickers and
I've seen those.
And that's the first shit that should get disposed of. And actually, in a lot of cases, I don't even throw that out because you just never know what's going on. If that gets
rummaging through the bins.
Oh, it's not even that. Like, so you put your bin out on the front verge and the bin truck comes along and picks it up, and that gets tipped out of a bag gets torn or something and ends up out the front of your house. Like, I mean, I'm being silly here, but you got to, at some point, you've got to start. Yeah. So a lot of that stuff I just I keep or destroy in some other way. Like, it's being paranoid, but that's the lengths you've got to go to. Whenever I'm setting up a new device or anything, it's my cameras are all literally physical bit of paper or tape or something over the cameras. Phones nowhere near where I'm doing this sort of stuff. Anything with a microphone, a camera, stuff like that. I just make sure it's nowhere near me when I'm doing that sort of stuff, because you just never know what the hell's listening or looking these days. You've got to be. It's paranoid, but you've got to be like that.
So touching on that, which is actually a good segue into seed phrases. How do we store a seed phrase?
You know what? I don't want to give an exact how, and so that, and we'll cover this a little bit more when I go through. What I do is I talk in blueprints. So I'll give you a general blueprint on, okay, this is what I think you should do as a concept. How you choose to implement that concept, that's personal and up to you. And the reason why I do that is 2-fold. Is once again, what threats are you trying to mitigate against? How much funds are you trying to protect? How clever are you as a user? So from a tech perspective, because some people will be really switched on when it comes to using cryptography to try and encrypt seed words and things like that and store them digitally. And you can sometimes be a little bit too clever. We've seen just recently, I think it was one of the core Bitcoin devs lost a whole heap of funds because he invented his own storage mechanism. Really smart and clever thing to do, but something went wrong with it and he got compromised. So often the simplest approach, which is just storing them physically somewhere where no one else can get them, is the simplest approach. Sorry, it's the best approach. So yeah, so we will have a look at another slide where I do a blueprint for how I think you should have a concept of doing this sort of stuff. And the reason why I do it is it looks after the here and now, but then it's building on something that can be used for the estate planning side of things and the legacy and transfer of digital assets. So we'll spend a bit of time going on that if you don't mind. Yep. Anything else we need to sort of cover off here on the spectrum, do you think, before we move on to something like that?
I think, I mean, obviously we sound like a broken record, but it's going to be mainly you, isn't it? You know, and I think like this, like the No Name Pleb says, most hacks are user errors. So you left, you know, you left your password lying around, or you connected to public Wi-Fi, or, you know, so, or you just clicked on a phishing link and you thought, oh, what's this? MetaMask has got problems and they're telling me that I need to, you know, sort my account out now. Otherwise I'm going to lose all my funds. A lot of the time, scammers are trying to push you, well, not a lot of time, all the time, they're trying to push you with like a very short time frame. So you're kind of pressurized into clicking the link or sending the crypto or whatever. So, I just think
on that note, the two things that I think are big risks for people in this space at the moment, one's been around for a long time, is the whole Ledger database that got so Ledger gave up their user data, I'm saying 2 years ago or more now, 2 or 3 years ago now. So that was a big list of people's email address. I'm not sure what other information was given up, but definitely email addresses. So people get a lot of phishing emails from that still to this day. The more recent one is the LastPass cock-up, which was of monumental proportions. So they've had more than user data, user contact data stolen. They've literally had user vault stolen, which was that's the one thing they need to get right. And it's so that is going to have a kick-on effect for decades, because there's information in there that they got that means people are going to be subject to a lot of phishing attacks and things like that, which is less than ideal. So when I start talking about this next approach, you need to have those sorts of things in mind. Even though I'll say some things and people will disagree, that's fine, because everyone's got to find their own balance. So we'll delve into that a little bit more. Just before we finish up here, the other thing is the UI in crypto is arguably still pretty crap. Let's face it. MetaMask obscures a lot of information, presents it in a way that mere mortals can't even understand it. So you've really got to be like almost a developer to interpret the information you're being given. It is getting better. So we've got things like Block Wallet, which is an alternative to MetaMask, is getting a lot better. It's got its share of quirks as well. Rabby, which I've talked about numerous times, I think Rabby is looking really good. It's one of the ones that presents things in the most friendly way. Does a lot of things with whitelisting and stuff like that you control. But at the moment doesn't support testnets and doesn't support PulseChain, because you can't put in custom networks and things like that. Now, I think that they will be quick to adopt it. They've had plenty of requests, but so the tools that we use are still leave a lot to be desired. So we've got to be super careful that when a screen pops up in MetaMask or Rabby or whatever it is, you actually read it. Don't just click on go. Like actually read it, and yeah, you're maybe not going to understand all of it, but try and decipher as much of it as you can, and be at least you've got a show of doing things correct, even if you don't understand a lot of the technical side. You've tried and you've picked up things like unlimited allowances getting made on your behalf. So you should be able to recognize that by now. Like if you're doing DeFi, that's the one thing you should be able to recognize by now is what sort of allowances you're giving up. So I'd say that's the one thing. If you don't know how to do that yet, you should really concentrate on when you're using MetaMask and stuff and understanding what the information is being presented to you.
Just slowing down, I think slowing down and double checking.
That's exactly right. Yeah. If sometimes you feel like you're in a hurry because you're trying to get a trade through and you want to get a good price or whatever it is, that's when mistakes are made. So if you're unsure, just step away and come back when you got a clear.
I had it yesterday. I bought something online, and they took crypto. So I got their ETH address, and normally I always double check the address on my Trezor. You know, I'll check the address on the MetaMask and I'll look at the Trezor. It matches, right? Because you can obviously you have to confirm it on the Trezor. And I guess I was busy yesterday, I was working, so this was after work, and I just did it quickly. And then when it went through, I was like, I didn't check that was, and thank God it was the right address. But for 10 seconds, I was like, where did I just send that? Where did that just go? And I was going on Etherscan, trying to find the transaction hash before, you know, it was still assimilating. It was okay, but I was like, I rushed that. I didn't look at the address. I just double clicked my Trezor to confirm. And so slow down, everyone, slow down.
I think we sometimes get complacent because we do a lot of these things over and over, and that one time when you get complacent is when you'll cock up for sure. I think you've just got to, for me, I'm guilty of doing exactly what you just said as well there, where you're rushing through and you just blindly, you press the button and you go, okay, yeah, it's cool, because you're just so used to doing something. But I think you've just got to take that extra second and just clock it. So just have a look at it and go, yeah, I've seen it, I've understood it, cool. Takes a split second. All right, let's have a look at a little bit of a blueprint, and this may be a little bit controversial because I'm going to say some things that people go, no, I would never do that, but let's roll with it. Okay, so this is a concept I've put together called the two worlds approach, and I think so. I've ushered a lot of people into crypto through a company that I've done a lot of consulting work with, using this sort of approach. And we have never, ever had anyone lose funds. So we've had some people do some silly things and we've had to help them out, but we've never had them lose funds using what I call the two worlds approach. So the two worlds approach, and you'll see it's got like a firewall between the online world and the physical world. And the way I look at this is you've got some things that from a convenience point of view, they're better to have online. Okay, and we'll talk about those in a bit more detail. But then you've got other things that just should never go online, like your seed words. And if you have this dividing wall between the online world and the physical world, such that these two items should never, ever be stored together on either side. So let's take an example of a passphrase. So hang on, I'll take a step back and I'll discuss what a passphrase is for people that may not know. So everyone's probably familiar with seed words. And seed words are what we use to derive a bunch of private keys and their associated public keys. So we have those seed words either in a hardware wallet or maybe in MetaMask or something like that. So be very clear when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about using MetaMask because that already breaks this rule. So MetaMask has got the seed words online. Yep. So I'm more referring to hardware wallets in this instance. So we've got our seed words and they derive our private keys, but we can add an extra bit of security over the top of those called a passphrase. And what it does is it takes those original seed words and adds a little bit, or just changes the private keys that are generated by those seed words. Okay, so we like think of it like a password over the top of your seed words, and it gives you a whole new set of addresses. Now, that's a pretty dumbed down explanation. If you want to find out more about that, happy to discuss that if anyone hits me up.
So in the passphrase, are you talking about the 25th seed phrase, basically?
Yeah, sometimes it gets referred to as the 13th word or the 25th word. However you conceptualize it, that's fine. Just understand all it does is it takes your original seed words, adds a little bit more data that means that when it derives the private keys, they're different to what your normal seed words would. Is it?
Okay.
Hopefully that's, yeah. So what it means is you can have an infinite number of passphrases over the top of your original seed words, and each one of those passphrases will generate a whole different set of addresses, and private keys.
But even if someone gets your seed phrase, they can't get your crypto if you have it stored behind a passphrase. Yeah.
Bingo. Yep. So when we go back to our security spectrum, well, what does that cover against? Well, one, it covers against the plausible deniability. So we can have an infinite number of passphrases, and hence an infinite number of addresses. So no one's ever going to know if they've got your final address or your main address. Yep. So that's that plausible deniability. But it also gives us good separation between the two worlds. So we can have our seed words stored physically, never ever stored online anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of caveats and things when I talk about this, but they're probably a little bit more advanced, which I don't want to go into on this stream. So we've got our just seed words, physical world only, never go online.
Yeah.
And then we've got our passphrases. What's the point in storing your passphrase with your seed words offline? It makes no sense, because if someone breaks into your house and steals your seed words and you've conveniently left your passphrase sitting there with it, well, then you've just broken this model as well.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm trying to each step of the way. So we said there was another thing on our security spectrum, which was break-ins. So we want to protect against that. So if someone broke in and stole your physical copy of your seed words, useless to them without the passphrase. And so we're trying to get that real clear division between these two worlds. Now, why did I say some people might get up in arms about that? Because we're storing a passphrase online. Okay, and potentially that's a bit of a no-no. You could see it as a bit of a no-no, but for me, I think the risk of storing the passphrase and the seed words together is greater than storing the passphrase in something like a password manager.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is you may end up with multiple passphrases that you need to put in regularly when you're interacting with different wallets. So having them in a password manager is good because it means you won't forget them, or if you do forget them, you've got a storage of them there. Now, I always get in the habit of whenever I'm putting in my passphrases, I always do them from memory. But I know they're sitting somewhere secure digitally if I needed to get them. And that also lends to way down the track when you want to do estate planning, how you can hand over keys in a secure way without compromising your security. So that I'm thinking 3 steps ahead here when I'm doing this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so if we have a look at that, we keep everything totally separate. Now, it's a shame I haven't got a pointer. I don't know if I can. Is this going to freak out again?
That's all right.
We'll see how we go. Yeah. Okay, I'll quickly run through this, and hopefully it'll give everyone a bit of a breakdown of what we're talking about here. So we start off. This is what we call defense in depth, or where we're trying to build layers upon layers of our security, so that there's not one single thing that will, if it breaks down, will cause us an issue. There has to be a multiple failure before your security is broken. So let's just quickly run through. I'll whiz through it a bit. So here is basically a clean computer. So it's got some sort of antivirus. It's got firewalls on it. Your actual device that you're using for the online world is clean and secure. All right. So you're not doing all your day-to-day stuff on it. It's clean and secure. Then this here is a secure profile. So if you've got, say, Chrome, Brave, all those sorts of mainstream browsers, you can actually create more than one profile. Yeah. And the reason why I do this is, let's just say you do jump on this computer and you need to quickly research something as part of what you're doing. You can have a browser which is a dirty browser, and whatever you search for in there is fine, but we keep a clean browser, secured, locked down on another profile. So you really lock down all the security settings on that browser. That's the one you install your MetaMask on. And if you need a password manager, that's the one you install the password manager extension on. And so any day-to-day browsing can be done in a different browser. And when I say day-to-day, I'm referring, it's still crypto related, and but it's something that you need to do as part of what you're doing when you're doing your crypto, but still have that secure browser. So we've isolated an environment where we've just got our browser now. And so we've got our password manager on here. And with our password manager, we need to secure that as well. So we've got 2FA locking down our password manager.
So no one can get into your password or something like that.
Yeah. Probably not my favorite choice, but if I was going to go with one at the moment, one called 2FAS is pretty good, open source and pretty good. So you've got your password manager, which we may store our passphrase in. So this is our password manager. We've got our passphrase stored in there, but to get into our password manager, someone needs a device with our 2FA on it. So we've locked all that environment down in our secure browser. And then when we interact with our MetaMask, so we plug our hardware wallet into our MetaMask. And when we go to interact with an application, it will ask us for our passphrase, which we know is online. So we're going to be entering that regularly on the computer. So it's okay to have that stored somewhere secure. We can put that in there, and then that gives us access to the blockchain. So this is like a secure environment that we've kept online, but there's not anything here that crosses into this physical world where we store our secrets. Yeah. Gotcha. And over here, I've got a secure email service as well. Depending on how far you want to go, there's getting some really cool tools now where something like a Proton mail, you don't have to dox yourself. You can.
Proton's great. I use that for my stuff.
Yep. So you can sign up for a Proton mail account and you can pay using Bitcoin. So you don't even have to have a credit card or anything in there. Yeah. So all the services that I'm looking for services where I don't have to give them any of my data.
Yeah.
I do not want to give these guys any of my information, or if I'm giving to them, it's an alias or something like that. Like it's same with the password manager. If you want to go for a paid service, something like a Bitwarden allows you to pay using Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So you set things up that divorce your real world identity from the services that you're actually using. So we've still got to be super vigilant online, but we're just trying to build a really strong online environment where we can store the things that we need to do crypto. It's a digital environment. There is things you need to store online, or use online, I should say.
Also,
how are we going?
Just to go back, it's great, man. This is great. I mean, just to see it laid out like this and see that the physical world shouldn't touch the online world and vice versa. I mean, it really clarifies it. And I just wanted to touch on again. You said obviously on your laptop you can open up different profiles, right? And one profile is just for crypto. Therefore, that Brave or Chrome doesn't touch anything but crypto. And I guess another way that I do it's a bit more complicated, but I've got one of my old Macs which I just wiped. And I just use that for crypto. So I guess that's the same, really, isn't it?
So what that's correct. So you've got a computer that you do your crypto on, but then on that same computer, I've got an isolated browser. And the reason why I do that is I just know I've locked that down super tight so that it doesn't store any history or do anything like. I've really secured that profile down. But look, hey, there may be a reason why you need to search something up on that computer, then you've got your dirty browser on that computer. We'll call it dirty browser. I mean, you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't.
Sounds a bit
Don't
weird.
say that. You shouldn't be doing any of your Pornhub stuff on there.
Yeah. The late night computer.
Yeah. Late night computer. Yeah.
Your dirty browser. Anyway.
So within that, so you're right. Within your secure, your fresh computer that you've got for crypto, have a locked down browser profile that is just really, really secure and has minimal stuff in there just to do what you need it to do.
Gotcha.
Yep. But yeah, if you go down that path, you're well on the right way. So the reason why I take this approach is, like I said, if push comes to shove, down the track, these services have some really cool features, like emergency access type features, where if something happens to me, I can give up a certain amount of information to someone I trust, so that they've got enough. You've left enough breadcrumbs for them to be able to get access to your crypto and know who they need to contact. And so I use a concept called trusted advisors. So I've got different groups of people, and I've laid out, okay, well, if something happens, these are the people that will get brought together, and they'll in unison be able to unlock all the components to be able to do this, to be able to release the funds. Because there's some people like a spouse that you would be comfortable giving more information to than, let's just, worst case scenario, something happens to both of you guys, then what happens? So you've got people that you in your life or are providing professional services like an accountant, a lawyer, or whatever. So you've got certain people in your life that you trust them to a certain degree. You don't want to give them too much information. So you've got to come up with a way so that if something does happen to people that you do trust more, there's a way that they can all be resurrected and brought back together for whether you've got kids or whatever. Yep. So yeah, you got to think a little bit longer term with stuff like this. But this is my base approach to setting up those next phases on how you do this.
Yeah, I mean, like anything in life, it's about a solid foundation. And probably, like, if you're up for it, maybe we do a part 2, which really deep dive into the estate planning more. But like, just getting the basics, which we've touched on, which is obviously slow down, and you're your own worst enemy a lot of the time in crypto. Store your seed, store your seed phrases in secure places and offline, and then at least have one different profile on your Brave browser or Chrome browser, which you only use. Nothing touches that. No YouTube, no Pornhub, no online shopping. That's just your crypto. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, spot on. And what we haven't sort of gone into, and it's probably a little bit, we're probably going a little bit too deep if we go down this path, is in the physical world. You can see I've got one key and I've got 3 people sitting below that.
Yeah.
So I've got one key here and then 3 individuals. So that's a particular type of seed sharing that you do, so that you can have, once again, parties that you trust them enough to give them some information, but not all the information. So how do you bring those parties together with the seed words? And that's using sort of Shamir type backups and things like that, which is a lot more complicated. But as your funds grow, you may want to look at that. And some of that stuff you need to have set up now. For the prior to Hex, it was a bit different. But now, if you're in the world where you're hard locking assets for any number of years,
decades,
then
in some
decades,
instances.
yeah, years or decades, yeah. Then there's a lot of those. Hex was one of the first ones to introduce like a hard lock for that period of time. But since then, there's been a number of other things come out, and there's going to be more. There'll be more of these things come out where they lock for longer time frames. So some of those things you can't do anything about after the fact. You've got to get that right now. So there's ways you can mitigate against that, and that's what take back to when we very first started the stream off, we said, this is your chance. When PulseChain starts, this is your chance to reassess the way you're doing your security. And if you've got things that you think are going to be more longer term, get the things in place now, get that environment right now so that you can deal with them and you're not trying to change it on the fly. That being said, this is all evolving. Like everything, you need to reassess all the time. So every few months I'll go back and I think I've got a pretty good security environment, but it can always be better. Everyone's security can always be better. So you just tweak it, go back and say, okay, I'm going to change this and I'm going to tighten up this. And in 6 months' time, you might go, okay, that's working pretty well. I'm going to tweak this now and tighten up that side of it. Just keep evolving and getting that more and more secure as you go. Sometimes you can't do it all at once. And that's partly down to your skills as well. Like you learn more as you go.
But you do have to be careful. There's a fine line, like you said before, where you kind of overcomplicate things. For example, I wrote some stuff down in code, which I thought I'd remember before. And I look back at it because I was like, I don't want to write down this passphrase or whatever. I'll write it. And I don't know what that means. I thought I did. I went back. I was like, what the hell's that? So you want to have a fine line between not locking yourself out your own crypto too.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I see there's some people that are uber smart with using like Vault Crypt and things like that, where they can put layers of encryption. It's almost like an Inception type thing where they can put layers and layers of encryption, which is all awesome. Like they know how to use it. But then if they get knocked over by a bus, someone else has got to come over behind them. How the hell is another person in their family going to deal with this? So you've got to find that balance where you, like I say, you need leave enough breadcrumbs so that it can all be unlocked in a systematic way by bringing multiple parties together. And this is the world as we know it at the moment. I think things are going to change dramatically over the next few years. And that's just from the way we store everything at the moment is, and I do still really like this, is you've got your seed words and we know that we can take those seed words and the standard's strong enough that we can go pop them in numerous wallets, hardware, whatever, and unlock our assets. We can generate those private keys and we know we've got assurance on them. Particularly when we have things like forks, having those seed words means that we can unlock the duplicate copies on another chain. Now, the way the industry's going is more of like the Gnosis safe sort of approach, where you're using sort of vaults and things like that to secure funds, which is great. It gives us more flexibility, and it means we don't have to have the reliance upon a set of seed words. We can do a lot more advanced stuff where if one person lost their seed words, then another multi-sig owner would still be able to access it. And there's all cool things you can do with that. But you lose some flexibility in that that contract that's on, say it's on Ethereum, you've got a Gnosis safe on Ethereum, and an EVM chain fires up on, like PulseChain's done. Now, we're lucky that people are going to come across and build front ends to support the Gnosis safe on PulseChain, but what if they didn't? What if that didn't, or there was a technical reason why it couldn't, or the chains changed just enough so that you couldn't? So I guess that's the pros and cons of having that new approach. And I think we're just very, very early days on that. I think that will evolve and we'll work around those problems. But if I was storing a reasonable amount of value at the moment, I don't think I'd go all in on that sort of technology.
Gotcha. What hardware wallets do you use? Trezor or Ledger, or what's your?
Won't talk about what I use, but I'll talk about some of the things out there that I think are okay. I'll give you some pros and cons. In particular, when you're using this two worlds approach and you want to use passphrases, you need a wallet that handles passphrases really well. So it's got good support in the industry. The UI for you using it is good. The way it's implemented on their platform is good. I don't think Ledger does that particularly well, to the point where it's not convenient enough to use. Like it's pretty messy, and there's a few undocumented bugs. Yeah, there's a few undocumented bugs where if you don't know about it, you can get caught. Trezor, on the other hand, they implement it really, really well. So there's pros and cons there. Ledger has vastly more support for all the different chains in the ecosystem. Trezor is good for EVM because it's compatible with ETH, but Ledger is always the first to have support for all the weird and wacky stuff and Cosmos and all those sorts of things. So depends what you're trying to do. In saying that, so we talked about the Gnosis safe type stuff. I know Vitalik uses that approach to store all his funds, but he's hardcore in on ETH, and he's not really worried about what all these other chains are doing. So for him, he doesn't give a shit if he's locked into ETH. So it depends what you're trying to do. So I still think Trezor's probably one of the nicest user interfaces to use, and why I've got it on here is that from a new person coming into crypto, it is probably the most user-friendly device on the market. That being said, I haven't used things like EliPow. I just don't trust at this point in time. It hasn't been around long enough. What else is there? There's the Engrave. Well, there's so many. I can't even keep up with them all now. Like, there's a lot of new entrants. I don't want to be the person to test them.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm sure they've all got their pros and cons, and some of them probably are vastly better than the things I use at the moment. What I don't like about a lot of the new stuff, they have batteries. So they're at the point now where they've got Bluetooth, and and I've seen so many failures on the upper end ledgers when the battery dies. Who wants to be reliable? You put this, you want to lock it away in your safe and forget about it. You don't want to come back and a battery's dead and you can't get your funds, or
no. I like the Trezor because you get phantom power from just plugging it into the computer.
Yeah. Now the downside to that is you're plugging it into a device.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's other devices where they call them air gapped, where you're not really plugging them into another computer. You're scanning QR codes and things like that. And everyone goes, okay, well, that's all cool. It's all safe. I go, yeah, but at some point you've got to trust something. So that device that's air gapped, you're going to have to upgrade it someday. How do you do that? Well, maybe you get a USB key and plug it into it, but there's still a trust factor there. Like, you've still got to trust something. There's always trust involved in this stuff. It's just where it's pushed to. So for me, you want devices that are user-friendly, don't have too many bells and whistles, just have enough to do what you need to do and do it in a reliable way, and they've been around for the test of time. I'm quite happy to let everyone else test all the other stuff. Or if you want to test the other stuff, don't do it on your main wallets.
Yes. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, basically. Maybe just try it with a side wallet with a little bit of dough in there and see how it pans out.
Yep. Yeah. But yeah, it's a fast-moving industry. Day to day, there's new things coming out. I can't keep up with it all, so I don't try. I just try and keep my shit safe.
Keep it basic. Like you said, I like the acronym in life, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Because a lot of the time, that's what happens. Like you said, you try and get, a lot of the time in life, you try and get too cute, or you try and be too far ahead of the curve, and it's normally the people that are first through the door that get shot, right? So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we're here in this industry because we do have that mentality where we're early or relatively early adopters. Like, you wouldn't be here if you didn't have that sort of mindset. This is an emerging space, so that it attracts that sort of person that is an early user, but you've got to sometimes just know when to pull back, and when you need to be an early adopter, or when it's better off, just like you say, don't be the first person through the door.
Exactly. Well, this has been awesome, man. Is there anything else we want to cover in this before we wrap this one up?
No, not for now. I might do a quick shameless plug for.
No, yeah, I want to hear about your site for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. Do that. So you would have seen all the slides that we viewed today had a bit of branding for Bradshaw Knox on them. So that's my website. So some people already know I do the steel plates for storing your seed words, but there's a raft of other things I've got on this site and a lot more to come. So I'm obviously very security focused in everything I do on this site. So there's new tools that I'm working on in the background, which I've just been quietly building for the last 6 months or so, which I think are going to give us a little bit more security and also some pretty clever features in the way we deal with some of these assets. And it's, funnily enough, using a technology that I was shitting on for quite some time, and that's NFTs. So I think we all see NFTs as the profile picture things, but that tech is actually really, really good. And it when you start exploring what it can actually do, it's pretty cool stuff. So I've got some NFT type stuff that I'm working on, which aren't profile picture things. They're useful tools that I needed. So everything that's on this site is stuff that I've needed for myself, and I think while I'm doing it for myself, make it so it's accessible for other people to use as well. So that's basically the premise I take when I'm doing everything for Bradshaw Knox.
That's awesome, man. I mean, so you've got steel plates and you've got all types of stuff there.
Yeah. So I've got the steel plates, and then I've obviously like things like that blueprint. Like I sit there and I come up with concepts that I need to implement to look after my assets, and in doing that, I think deeply about how the best approaches and things like that. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well put it out there for other people to make use of.
Absolutely. I think this has been a great overview. And I think if you're down for it, please come on and let's do another legacy, how we protect the legacy more. And
for sure, man. Yep. Happy to.
And a part 2, because I think the basics, just to summarize it again, it's yourself, right? You've got to be wary of yourself. You've got to store your seed phrase securely, and don't let the online stuff touch the offline and vice versa.
Yeah. So that blueprint that we just went over, it touches on every single one of these things by the alien invasion that you want to protect against. So protecting against your silly self, mitigating against online threats, theft, wrench attacks, physical destruction. So if you take that approach using that 2 worlds approach, it addresses 99% of these issues that you come across.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, listen, Jexxa, thanks so much for your time. This is part 1 done, the basics and the mindset, and then part 2, hopefully, maybe PulseChain might be even out then, because we could get a PulseChain announcement any day.
Well, I'm feeling it in my bones. Mind you, I've been feeling it in my bones for many months now. So.
What do you think? Do you think V4 is the last one?
Well, I mean, most people probably know that I've put my hand up and I've been running a validator. So I'm spending a fair bit of time in the dev chat with other people that are doing that. So I'm seeing the progress, and we just went through the Shanghai upgrade, and that went really smoothly. We've seen some stress testing yesterday where we've seen the network just get absolutely hammered. And I don't know what the results of that were, but it definitely put the network under stress. So all the things are there. Everything's working. Everyone's validators up and running, doing everything they should do. Network's efficient. Transactions are fast. They're cheap. And that's what we all wanted. So I can't see that there's too much more to go.
It's close. Well, like I said, maybe part 2, PulseChain might even be out then, and it might be even more, pertinent to talk about legacy stuff, because I'm sure PulseChain is going to make a lot of people wealthy.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't want to be running around like a headless chook when PulseChain launches. If we've got a little bit of time now, spend a bit of time checking up on your environment, your security environment, and how you're storing things, and get your house in order before all hell breaks loose.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, Jexxa, and you'll have to come back on soon for part 2. I look forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers. Guys, definitely check out Jexxa's own YouTube channel, which I'll link below in the description box, and also Bradshaw Knox for all your security stuff. And if you like content like this, do hit that subscribe button and that bell button so you're notified every time we drop new content on the channel. And thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.